All right, does that look okay? My co-host see some stuff? Or anybody?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you so much. So welcome to this morning's training on how to ID some of our invasive species out here in the driftless region around the state, and also how to use the EddMAPs program. My name is Matt Walrath. I serve as the Invasive Species Program Coordinator for the Upper Sugar River Watershed Association, which I may call Upper Sugar for short over the course of the training. I see some of our staff and STAR volunteers are on, so thank you for attending and for your interest. I also serve as a council member for the South Central Invasives Partnership, which is a SISMA, otherwise known as, well, that's the shorthand for a Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. So this training is being sponsored by SCIP to get the word out about how we can work together as a group of people to do this work of reporting and general management of invasive species together in our region. So we do serve, I'll show you what we're talking about here a little bit. So here's a map of all of the SISMAs in the state by color. And we are that 5-county block in the central lower Wisconsin area right there. So we've been going for a little over a year now, and we're building some momentum and more council members and more participants. So thanks for coming. If you have more questions about that, or we can talk about that more at the end. And you're welcome to visit uppersugar.org and go to the SCIP page and sign up for our newsletter. If you didn't already hear about it from that, join us in the conversation about invasive species and how we can share those out with our various partners, municipalities, and neighbors to work on this all together. So I do serve on staff. Just briefly about my organization. This is what Upper Sugar does in the region, amongst many other things. We serve, I'm serving under as a designated agent for a bunch of counties that will do this kind of work as we move around the region. So some of it's talking to people about just this kind of exact stuff, doing signage, doing rapid response, and boat inspection. So we're talking today, though, about invasive species. And here is the very dry statute. It's the law of how we define things. Words are important. So when I say invasive species in this particular context, I'm talking about certain things that are actually listed. So you see around the edge of this picture, all kinds of stuff from feral hogs to jumping worms to longhorn beetles, fish, and a lot of plants, aquatic and terrestrial. We're going to focus more on the terrestrial stuff today with a little of a look at wetland and some aquatic stuff, not so much the worms or the pigs. We talk about snails a bit. So economic or environmental harm. Just going to give a brief upload of what it is we're talking about here. So we have a rule in Wisconsin called NR 40 that makes these things, makes a list for these things all the time. And what you want to look at is this thing called viable organisms. So if it can spread, if it's alive and it can keep going through its other spread and propagules, then we know that we want to take care of it if it's on this list. And you might know one of them in particular that's pretty nasty. We'll talk about more later, which is this wild parsnip. This is a great example of something that's on the list that we want to, that causes some environmental harm for sure. It definitely could be aggressive in our open areas and kind of outcompete our natives. And it also causes harm to us as humans, which can be economic if you have to miss work for it. If you get these nasty burns on yourself, like you see on this guy, that's going to kind of set you back. And so we have to prevent that kind of stuff from happening as much as we can in the environment. We define native species, or the NR 40 rule does, based upon partially this book, Vegetation of Wisconsin, which had a catalog of lots of different species that were they were recorded at the time of settlement. So when the surveyors went around and made plot lines, they would record the vegetation. And so if it was there at the time, it was considered to be native to some extent. Now, expert biologists and the university, and the DNR here also do this work to say what is or what is not a invasive species. So we have a list of them that's being constantly updated. It was first put out in 2009 and is being updated even now. It'll be revision number 4. That'll probably come live in 2023 at this point. So when we talk about that, we mean there's 2 different types of categories, and we're going to be mostly talking about things that are in this category right now, which is the restricted category. So as you can see by these bullet points, these are the species that were mentioned in the chat. It's buckthorn, garlic mustard, purple loose strife. They're quite common in the state. You can find them all over. So the state doesn't dictate that you destroy them necessarily. They would like you to control them, and you cannot legally move them. So you can't sell them, trade them, transport them, or introduce them to the environment. If you're doing control work and you're taking them to the dump, that's one thing that's actually exempt. But otherwise, you can't move them around anymore. That is different, and you'll see that orange color on there. It's for restricted species. You'll see that kind of pop up in the rest of the presentation as well. Compared to prohibited species. And a new word pops up in that line of descriptors. You cannot possess these species. So these are the ones that are going to be, these species are either not in the state or just in very small sections. And they're also going to be very damaging to the ecology or the economy of Wisconsin if they do get further established or get in the state at all. Kudzu is a great example of a prohibited species. We do not have any that we know of in Wisconsin, but if you know kudzu from Florida, it is a thug and will take over wetlands, and we don't want that here. So that's on the prohibited list. Just important stuff to know as we kind of tease out what we're talking about for priorities. Really, I can't emphasize this enough, and I will be mentioning decontamination and our food brush stations and everything else that we work with to do this kind of decontamination. And ounce prevention is really worth that pound of cure. So you can see Phragmites on the left. That starts from 1 seed and becomes something that's way taller than I am. Versus cleaning off your tools when you're mowing, it can be hugely important to how we do our long-term management. It's basically prevention being the best way because it's very destructive once it gets into the environment. I do see we got some questions coming in, which is great. If you do want to put questions into the chat, I can address those at the end if we have time. I'm just going to, for the sake of flow, I'm going to keep presenting here. So with all this in mind, as the training was promised, I'm going to blast through some of our region's biggest concerns. Now, you're going to see maps from where these things occur all over the state. However, these are picked because they often have a strong presence in our region. So I live in Madison. Upper Sugar is based out of Mount Horeb, and the SCIP group that we're focusing on here today is based at Sauk, Iowa, Dane, Greene, and Lafayette counties. So these species I'm talking about here today are things that we're going to commonly see, would like to have reported, and maybe also get you up to date on what they look like, how to do some control. And then we'll move on to that, to EddMAPs and that tool, and then a bit about how to move other ideas forward for prevention and control. So as we go through our species, I thought we'd start with a real common one. You'll see this everywhere. As you can see on this map, it is quite common. So garlic mustard, it's a small biannual, means that it lives for 2 years. It sets seeds in the 2nd year. It smells like garlic. It's going to be covering our forest floors once it gets established. This is a great reason to clean your boots off, because those little seeds will get stuck in the tread of your boot, and that's how it moves around quite commonly too once it gets far across the state. So very common, but something that you can, it's easy to pull. You're going to need a long volunteer time, though. You have to do it year after year to get the seed stock down. The buckthorns were mentioned. So we do have 2 invasive buckthorns, and they look pretty similar And so here's a picture of them. You'll see these guys out in the environment quite often. The common and the glossy buckthorn, with pictures of their bark with those lenticels that are quite common. Those little bulges are called lenticels. It can be confusing because the common buckthorn is also shiny, but the glossy buckthorn is more shiny. So that's one that is going to be commonly overtaking our understory. That will get to be a small tree. It looks kind of, when it's young, like our native cherry, but it has some distinctive characteristics. Often has this orange mold on it right now that you can kind of tell it apart from other things. And I'm going to give you all these common species because I hope that you can then take the knowledge of this, maybe one or two of these will resonate with you, find them in your backyard and go and use EddMAPs right after this training. So by giving you this list of things that are common and not the prohibited ones, we don't know where they are. I'd love you to do that prohibited look, but we're going to kind of start from where it's easy to find stuff. So again, this is a restricted species that is absolutely everywhere, and probably underreported for those maps. So wild parsnip came up as something that we want to think about and prevent. So this is the classic carrot umbel. That's what they call this flower. That's an umbel right there. That kind of flower, you know, it's look at upside down. It looks like your umbrella got blown over by the wind. So this is shade intolerant, so it's going to be mostly growing on the edges of our fields. It is very nasty in that it does, again, cause these burns over time. And that's it's also a biennial, so you'll have this what's called a basal rosette in your first year. And upper right hand corner, you look at that, it's called the variegation. So it's super cut in. Kind of looks like a celery to some extent, but it's got a very distinct looking leaf structure when it's young. And then the second year, it'll put up that main stalk and then set flowers. For control, you can do mowing is effective as long as you get it when it's setting what's called secondary umbels, which is when those little teeny, the main umbrella then has these smaller flowers coming out the side of it. If you mow it at that time, it won't go to seed and it won't set more flowers. If you mow it earlier than that, it will set more flowers and go to seed. If you mow it after it's gone to seed, you're just spreading it because it's going to die anyways. So you're not really doing any good for your project. You're just spreading seeds. You want to minimize disturbance for that reason too. So this loves to grow and disturb soils. So best you can do to get away from open soil, especially in the seeding time of year, is going to be better. There are a couple of lookalikes on this one that I wanted to mention because so you'll see the cow parsnip, which has similar, it's also the carrot flower, obviously it's white. And then golden Alexander often gets a bad rap on the right-hand side here. If you look at the leaves though, they're quite different. They don't have that, that variegation. They don't have that cut in kind of celery look to them. So, but the flower structure does look quite similar. So these are both not, cow parsnip is in fact considered native, and golden Alexander is also native. So and then in the carrot family, another one that's high on my list now is poison hemlock. And so you can see they've got this almost parsley-like leaf here. The compound, meaning that each one of those little leaflets here, each one of these things across is in fact considered one leaf. So they have lots of little leaflets in there. They have a very distinctive stem. So they're kind of these hollow looking stems with this bruised purplish marking on them. They do set these white flowers, again, umbels like this. Now this stuff's quite poisonous. So if you handle it, you'll see it, it loves river. It's all over the place in our area along the sides of streams. So when you're out there trout fishing, you don't want to brush into this stuff if you can avoid it. And the seeds themselves are actually very, very poisonous. So you do not want to eat these seeds. They can even cause cardiac issues in cattle and dogs if they eat them. So not recommended. So carrot family can be bad out there. Things to note and things to report up into EddMAPs. We'll get into that later. I mentioned bush honeysuckle. There's a bunch of them. And does it matter exactly which one it is? No, not really, because we do have a native twining honeysuckle. It's more of like a vine. But when you see this out in the landscape, it's a very distinctive, very showy bush, multi-stemmed. It ends up looking pretty ratty over time as it gets older. The stems, and you can kind of see the bottom of this bush on the right. They have lots of dead stems and lots of dead little side branches, so it looks kind of little bit gnarly, and has a beautiful flower that, yes, the birds and bees do love. However, it can be quite aggressive in our understory of our forests, so we want to make sure that we take care of that. Here's an example of some of the honeysuckles that we have out there and where they're distributed. But for the sake of what we're talking about, if it has that kind of little trumpet-looking flower and it's a bush honeysuckle, it's something that you might want to report and take care of. And if you're not sure what it is, you can just mark it as a invasive honeysuckle in the EddMAPs program, and the experts will help you tease it out, or it just there's a category for that as well. We're getting through these. I know it's a lot at once, so we can send out this. This is being recorded, so you feel free to listen to this or slow it down again some other time, or this will be available as a PDF as well if you want these cues and ID characteristics. One of my personal nemesis is the knotweed complex here. So in particular, Japanese knotweed is quite common on the landscape. It's got this bamboo-like look to it and gets really, really tall. The reason it's such a problem is that it doesn't really hold, it loves to grow along the sides of rivers, but it doesn't hold the river bank in. It doesn't have the small hairs called filamentous root hairs that you would otherwise see on most shrubs. When you pull a plant out of the ground and you see that ball of dirt, knotweed does not do that. It just doesn't hold the soil. So it clones itself, spreads itself around. Here's some more pictures of it. So right now is actually a great time to ID it. As it's starting to go to sleep, everything else is, I guess, into the fall, maybe like 2 weeks from now. As all the other leaves drop, you'll see these very distinctive canes that are, again, they're hollow bamboo-like. It's actually in the buckwheat family. It's not a bamboo, but it looks like it to the common eye. Has these big, usually with a drip tip, that's like the tip on the end of them, coming out of the ground. Again, up to 10 to 16 feet tall, depending upon the stand. And it's taking over entire swaths of the environment. You can see like a monoculture of this stuff down in Connecticut, but doing this in the dells, and I see it really being aggressive in our river areas. So it's very hard to control once it gets established, because it's just sets a lot of energy under the ground. So if you know of this stuff in a small population, it's very much worth taking care of before it spreads along the riverways. And there are more than just Japanese knotweed. There's also Bohemian and giant knotweed, and but they all look quite similar. They all have this very kind of alternate, somewhat spade-shaped leaves. They have these flowered stalks come off the side, and they're treated the same way either way. And again, if you don't know what they are, even it can be hard to tell even from a professional botanist point of view. You can put them as just an invasive knotweed into EddMAPs, and that does a lot of good, and we know where we are. Now, the stuff, again, this is a picture of what happens when it gets into the side of even a building. It can be quite destructive and punch through people's foundations, break through asphalt, go into the side of your trailer or whatever it is. And it spreads by these fragments. So, if a piece of fruit the size of a hot dog will make a whole new population. So you don't want to be moving this stuff around with your utilities. And I see it popping up along utility lines all the time. Another restricted species, purple loosestrife. Beautiful purple flower, quite common in the state. It's one that we do have a biocontrol program for. So we love to see where these populations are popping up, so that if there's a big enough density, we can consider raising beetles to control them. In fact, some of our volunteers on the call have been our beetle rearing crew, and we'll be doing that again next year. So there's a whole DNR program devoted to this. So it's a wetland perennial, and that's why it's an issue. It's one of the woodier species that's going to be out there in these wetlands, like a willow, except it even likes its feet to be even wetter. So it can change what was a wetland full of our native small forbs or vegetation and grasses, and it replaces those with its woody structure and will change the water quality and outshade our natives. So we want to make sure that we're doing our best to manage that with beetles or a small population. It's pretty wimpy. You can just go pull it out by hand or with a pick or whatever, or with a shovel. A little bit more about that. So the leaves are quite opposite. I can't get into Botany 101 too much, but you can see where they come off opposite of each other versus alternating like each other. So they come across very, very symmetrical there, these lance-shaped leaves, and very beautiful purple flowers that come out. They're done now, but they almost look like firecrackers, like going from the top. It's like a sparkler that goes up. And there are other purple plants. And purple doesn't mean bad, but if it has a woody stem and it's in the wetland, it's really knobby. It's a bush. It's likely that's all the other ones that have purple flowers are going to be just more of a couple stems coming from the ground versus a full shrub. Another one now gets complicated. So I mentioned prohibited and restricted as a concept for where you can possess and where you cannot possess things. Look at the map here, and you'll notice on the east side of the state, we call this Phragmites. Common reed, but that's a very common name. So just usually call it as Phragmites. That's what I call it. It's very dense on the east side of the state, but not on the west side. So, and part of our territory, in fact, most of our territory besides Dane County for skip, this is a prohibited species. And therefore, the detection and eradication is highly prioritized. However, you get to Waukesha, this stuff is all along the sides of the highway, and it's just not treated quite the same. It's a very, very tall grass. So that was the same picture that you saw, that woman with a brush cutter cutting, and was 16 feet tall over her head. So you can see how it kind of makes this node structure and makes this over the top here. Kind of these things come up and pop up. And this feathery stalk, so it's kind of people call it bottle brush plant. They use it in crafts and stuff, but please don't. It's quite destructive to wetlands. It can get really, really thick. My dad, as a waterfowl hunter, knows this stuff and hates it because it will make it so he can't even hunt where he used to because it gets so thick that nothing can grow in it, and you can't really walk through it very easily. So it's definitely a problem. Again, 3 to 20 feet tall, depending upon the landscape that it's growing in. So if it's already shaded or has other natives around it, it won't be as tall. But when it's out in the open with lots of nutrients, it can get really, really tall. And there is a native Phragmites, but it has a much more wimpy look to it here. So you can kind of see the native versus invasive look with the native just doesn't branch. It's not very branched in its how it seeds out, and he's going to have lots and lots of side branches, and they're just much more vigorous. If you ever have any questions, take a picture, get it to the DNR, get it to me, and we can look at native versus non-native. They both are around there, but the non-native stuff's quite destructive, so we want to report that. Almost done here with our ID component. This is Japanese hops, or they call it water hemp. It is related to the beer brewing type of hops, but it does not make the proper chemicals to brew beer. Sorry, these hop cones are not going to get you an IPA, despite whatever you want. It's really prevalent in our region, especially moving up from the Mississippi Valley. You can see this map. So really, where I work a lot in the driftless area, it's a big problem, again, because it's so widespread. It's restricted there, but we really want to make sure it doesn't spread to the other parts of the state where it's prohibited. Because again, this thing can make it's a very, very it's a hemp. So the little strands that die off each year will make like almost like a net of hemp that will press down on our native stuff. It climbs up the tops of trees and infrastructure, and it seeds a lot, and the seeds float down the rivers and go up in the high banks. So definitely a problem. Even goats don't like it because it's very prickly. So if you find this stuff and you pull on it and your hand says, ow, it might be Japanese hops. One that's new to me, and I was just out in Verrocco yesterday checking out, it's a lovely plant called Porcelain Berry, and it has these very like Easter egg looking berries that are quite lovely in their color range, and they have these little kind of black spots on them. So it's been used as floral arrangements, and it's recommended as a ornamental vine. But I'd say use native grape or use Virginia creeper if you want a vine to take over like your side of your fence. This stuff can be really, really aggressive, up to 15 feet in one season for growth. Has almost a mulberry look to its leaves. It has those big cuts in there, usually like 3 to 5 lobes. Here's how you can tell it apart. Because when it's out there and it's winter, it can be challenging to tell if it's porcelain berry versus wild grape, always wait till it flowers again or leaves, because they're quite distinctive that way. But the white pith is a really good thing. That's the inside of the plant. If you snap it off when it's fresh and the very core of it's white, it's going to be porcelain berry. That's even a good winter ID characteristic. So that one is prohibited, though it is spread around the state to some extent through the ornamental trade. We want to get on top of that and control that before it gets into our native areas. Switching my hat back over to my aquatic invasive species side, since we are a watershed association after all. Really common plant, Eurasian water milfoil. It has this distinctive, so you can see more than 12 leaflet pairs. So a leaflet pair is going to be each one of these, so you count each one side of it, and there's more than 12, it's going to be this invasive plant, and it just grows really, really thick. You can see these infestations, and this is how we want to clean our boats off. We don't move this stuff around. We want to know where it is. And if we see this in a lake that's not reported, let's let people know so we can control it when it's young, if possible. Otherwise, we know that we have to manage for that so it's not being spread around to other nearby water bodies. So another one that's common is our curly leaf pondweed. And I call it lasagna noodles, and it's quite small. So it has these kind of like wavy look to it. It's distinctive in that nothing else looks quite like this. It's quite rigid with these lasagna noodles. You can make a hot dish out of that. You can almost imagine that. And then it actually will snap off the end of it, end of its growth structures, and make these things called turions. And it's a hardened little pile of leaves that will then stem out into another and regrow into a whole other plant the next year. So it can move around by trailers, boats, people's boots even. I guess that'd be a lot of vegetation. You can see it's pretty aggressive when it gets established, and will all compete our native water-loving plants. So I think probably the only non-plant on here, but it's really important in our region. I want to just take a moment to talk about it while we're here, which is the New Zealand Mud Snail. So you can see it's got what's called a dextral. It's a right-hand opening. You can see how when you're looking at this thing straight on the right-hand side here, that's the opening. It can stay. They're really quite small. It's hard to even. I think this picture with a key shows you, but they're full size. They're a grain of rice, and they're also really. They're like wizard's towers. They're very pointy. You see how they kind of are quite they're quite longer than they are wide. From even their biggest ones. We do have a native snail that looks somewhat like this. That has a dextral opening, but it doesn't have a trap door on it, and it's going to have a much larger. That first segment's going to be really, really big with just a couple small whorls on top. So when you have this very distinctive wizard's tower look, this is a dime. Look how small these things are. The size of a grain of rice, and it can be out of water for up to 26 days. So we really want to make sure that we're cleaning our stuff off, not spreading the stuff around, and reporting it when we see it. This is a really important one to get eyes on the ground so that we can know where we want our booth brush stations, where we want to do our outreach campaigns to do this kind of stuff. What can you do about this one quickly? Just get rid of those felt sole boots. That's how they live and go along the side of our rivers. People they love to live in these things and hang out in your gear. They never get dry and they keep on going. So some tips for what you do to take care of this stuff. This is the law. So whenever you're out there doing this, make sure you inspect, drain, scrub, and rinse to get that stuff out of your gear. And this is super important. Whenever I can talk about this, I do, because we don't know how to control it when it's in the waterways, and it definitely makes a ton of little critters, and they mess up our food webs out there in the water. So that's why we have our star volunteers out here making booth brush stations. So if you see those, use them. Cleaning gear is happy gear anyways. Your mud room could be less muddy, your truck will get less muddy, and it helps us to prevent the spread of invasive species. So just a reminder here, part of my job, always get these little ticks in here. So spots that need signage, let me know, and just remember to clean that stuff off. And that goes for really all of the stuff I talked about. So the garlic mustard goes in your treads of your bike, or the New Zealand mud snails in the treads of your boots. If you got fill that you're moving around, it could be that knotweed, or really, honeysuckle as well can get stuck in. The seeds can be quite easy to move around. So play, clean, go. Should be like clean, play, clean, go. But show up with clean gear, leave with clean gear, and you do us all a great favor. With that, I want to get into our EddMAPs section of the training. I know that was a whirlwind, but feel free to reach out to myself or Hannah to get a copy of this PDF. We can send it out to the participants as well, so you can kind of look at that in more detail. So here we go with EddMAPs. What does EddMAPs stand for? Well, it's got lots of uppercase and lowercase letters. I'm not sure what that is, but it is the Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System. There was a prompt from Hannah to go ahead and make an account, but I'm going to walk through the utility, why I love to use this particular program, and then I'm also going to look a little bit at how you can set up an account, and by doing so, we're going to be able to see the records that you create. They'll be vetted by a professional, and then you can actually send that record to me for better observation, and it gets put into the whole decision-making process for how we spend the money of control and how we do our outreach in the region. So you can see some of the benefits here. It is it's updated all the time, again by professionals. The distribution maps are really quite handy in that it's going to be comprehensive across boundaries, across borders. So in our state, we have a database for aquatic invasive species, but that's not the same database they have in Minnesota or Michigan. So they're not talking to each other. EddMAPs is a national platform, and in fact, international. It goes up to Canada as well. So you can use this to think about threats, even if you're on the boundary of some other place that's not going to have the same rules or same reporting stuff to their municipalities. This is going to be an overarching way to look at these issues. And they also have great ID tips and management information, all kind of baked into the application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through an example of a report that I made, and then we'll do it I'll do something in real time. I'll kind of look at how you can get the stuff set up. If you're not set up yet, I don't think this is not the best moment for you to fiddle with your mobile device and get that going. Hopefully I can get you the tools to do that, and you can do that right after the training. Go find that garlic mustard, or right now actually it's going to be honeysuckle or buckthorn, and report it and get some of that under your belt. So you want to make an account, and that's going to give you the ability to access your records afterwards and do revisits. It's just a good reminder of what's out there too. You can add your pictures and all that kind of stuff. So here's an example of what the EddMAPs page looks like once you're into. So I'm in the report sightings tab up here on the home site page. You're going to drop down your type of pest and then your observation date. What's great is that it actually will round up things, so you kind of let people know where you're at here, your percent cover. And then what's nice is you can actually draw on the map. You can actually use this little symbol here to physically click and make a polygon. And that polygon is going to be, right on the map. You can see right where it is. It does the math for you. So it takes the guesswork out of what's happening with how big it is. Because I don't always take out, a measuring tape that can even measure the size of some of these infestations. So if you know where it's at, you can just do it right there, and it gives you all the numbers you need for lat long and everything else for the size of the patch. I love it personally because I can manage my reports and get the idea of where I'm seeing stuff for my other work, and then I can refer these records to again municipalities to say, hey, I noticed this here. Here's my photos. Share this link with your right-of-way crews or with your naturalists, and we can look at this together and get some control on this. That way, we're not sending around 25 megabytes of pictures between different people. It's just a permanent log that's going to be right there that we can always look at. So, and the best benefit of this, the PC platform, you know, you can do this right at your home desktop. I'll walk through that in a minute here, but I'd really like to emphasize the power of either of these two applications. So EddMAPs, which is this one in the upper left, or EddMAPs Pro. Now, I like EddMAPs Pro. I'm a professional, so maybe that makes sense. It is a little more, a couple more steps to use that, and I'll kind of go through how they're different. So EddMAPs, this mobile platform, so they both sync up to your online EddMAPs account. So whatever you're going to do with these mobile applications is the same you could do at a PC, and you can see your reports and your uploads all in one place on your dashboard once you get back to your PC if you want to manage those records. The EddMAPs, the simpler one, not the Pro one, is great in that it has these this ID component here. Okay, so it's going to have images and info, and to some extent a map of where things are occurring. But what's different about this, that one does not have the offline map component. Okay, so while it's kind of more for like a beginning, like if you're going to be in a city and you know you have coverage, you can do it's a little simpler to use, and it has the you know, characteristics and things you can kind of double check on the fly what you got going on for that species before you report it. But it doesn't have the offline maps. Now, I work in the driftless area of Wisconsin, and the coulees are not known for their great cell phone reception, and there's not lots of Wi-Fi either. So for me, the EddMAPs Pro is a very useful tool in order to get offline, but it takes a couple more steps. So I'm going to run through that quickly now. So if you go and download EddMAPs Pro version of it, and you have your EddMAPs account, you're going to actually have to go in your dashboard here. And so this is the kind of the splash page. You'll see this is basically the home page. You're going to have all your different things up here. So My EddMAPs is where you control your own data. And you're going to go to My County List down here at EddMAPs Pro Tools. This took me a minute to figure out, so I'm hoping this is helpful for you. There are FAQs. There's tools and trainings up here. So if you have questions, they're really great PDFs on how to do all this step by step as well. But this is the kind of quick and dirty way to do it. So what you're going to want to do then is then go to you create a county list, and you actually have to pop it in here. You add your counties, and then they will. I have a bunch of I serve a bunch of regions. So I even have neighboring like Minnesota and Illinois and Iowa counties that are next to my other areas that I serve. So I have, I think, 35 counties on here. The idea is then that when you get back to your mobile device, you'll then have these counties listed that you can then go ahead and you actually have to download the maps to your device, and it's easy. You just click on download map, and then they'll get that information of the actual current map, like from Google, of the area. So you can use that as a reporting tool. And you also do have to, just as a reminder, you're gonna have an upload queue on your mobile device. And so whenever you do something, you're gonna, as far as making a report, it's gonna put it into your upload queue. You have to click on that upload when you're probably on Wi-Fi, ideally, if there's pictures, but you can do it even from the field. It'll be saved there as a record with your Polygon, your photos if you added them, information, but you want to click upload, and then that'll let you get it into the cloud to be verified. These are verified by professionals, so it's been Ann Pierce in our region who works for UW, or other people that are really good at looking at photos and saying, yes, that's not what that is. They're trained botanists. So, and now we're going to go just for fun off the chart, and I'm going to show you how to do this live so you can kind of see some of the tools I'm talking about from the PC perspective. This is not mobile. This is me at my desktop, but check this out. So, you guys still see my screen? Thinking? It doesn't say I stopped sharing. So here's our Flash page, and so I'm signed in. And one of the best tools. So we're looking at, let's look for, so what you can do here is you can search for whatever you want. So let's look for, hey, Japanese honeysuckle is right there. But I'm gonna say knotweed, okay, just to, all right, so Japanese knotweed. Now you can do this a lot of different ways, but I'm gonna do this by point. So you can do it by state, so it'll block up just the states. By county, so just the counties will appear green. You saw some of that earlier. But I like to do the points so you can actually really see what your distribution is live. And as it loads here, in all its glory, I think this is full screen. This is pretty neat, I think. So you can see where it's been reported in the entire state, and as you zoom in, it starts to resolve itself. So you can see where people have actively reported this in the area. So as we get closer and closer to our region, we get more and more little dots on the map, and they kind of start to resolve themselves. So a lot in Madison, that's where I'm going, because we're going to zoom in here, and I'm just going to show you one of the utilities of this, is that as I get closer and closer. So I was just at Edgewood to do some education. We're going to do a biocontrol project out there, and this is something that I know of, this population right here. So I can actually click on this, and it's going to give me the reporter, Mark Renz, so he's a professional, the name, all this kind of stuff on here. Click on this ID, it takes me to this exact population. So you can see that dot on the map, and that is accurate. It has all the lats and longs, it has everything you need. There's photographs. So you click on this, and it actually shows you a live picture. This is the picture of this exact infestation. Now I can actually revisit this record if I want, which is a great tool for your management overall, and say, yeah, this is all there. Now I know this has been treated because I talked to the Edgewood crew, and so I'm going to go and do. So this is, I'm just going to walk through how you do this. So I observed this. This is actually live data. I'm gonna, this will be something that I just saw. So what's nice is I can go down here to this map and zoom in and update this, because I know a little bit more about where it is. So I'm actually going to go out of here, because right now it just has 1 point. I'm going to zoom in as far as I can. I'm going to say, oh yeah, where's our road? Okay, great. So I click on this thing. I'm going to say it's like right about on this side of the fence in this dead area here. So it's actually like right about here. Okay, boom. Now it fills up my lat long, it fills up my county. That also is going to update my my infested area. We're going to say it's an edge of field and forest. Abundance is a scattered plant that's been treated. It is, I just saw it actually, it was in flower, it's mature, and there we go. So you can also then, I'm not going to upload, you can do more comments, you can do voucher stuff. I'm going to go ahead and submit that report. And so, visit type. There's probably other stuff in here that I could click on. Site revisit. So here we go. Monitoring. If it's got a red, if it's red, you have to click on it. So there we go. And there, I have actually now in live time updated some information about the EddMAPs stuff that I saw. So that's and then it's the same thing. Now, if you want to report a sighting, you do, let's see, go to report sightings here. It's nice to check an area to say, oh, hey, that's been reported before or not, because that can be handy for knowledge of, you don't need a double report. You could revisit a report. So it's good to check. If you see a sighting, you might want to check to see if it's been reported there or not. But otherwise, it's good. We'll say, let's look at plants. Let's look at, you click through here, Wisconsin. And then again, it's going to give me a drop-down list of stuff that I can. So again, you can type in here, say purple wood strife. And I think I showed you pretty much the same areas, but this is just going to be I don't have a live one to do here, but you go through your, say that we're looking at something in Mesomanie. So I know there's a bunch out here. You can zoom in, do a, here's my Dunlap hollow. There we go. Well, yeah, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and make an observation here. And I know there's purple blue strife all throughout this area. All right. So we got our information there. There is leaf damage, which it's mature. When I saw it last, it was in seed. The abundance was scattered plants with about a moderate cover in a, let's see here, kind of wetland swamp area. And there we go. We're looking pretty good. This actually, I don't have any images, but I know that it's there. I'm going to go into the support because it might be a revisit. But so it's as simple as that. Now you can get more detailed, and I would, you do want to go ahead and choose your files and upload them. If you're in your mobile app, you can do this right from your. You just hit choose file, and it'll go to your gallery on your phone. Otherwise, if you're on the PC version like I am right now, you need to download the picture and then upload it to this to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and submit this. All right, and then so now you have this ongoing record. You can manage these. You can actually, they'll be verified. They won't appear on a map until they've been verified by the professionals at EddMAPs. So you can't just write in random crap and just like get it up there because they're going to say no. Now, people that run this know me. They say, well, Matt's pretty good. I'm sure that's actually there. So my verification is easier because they know who I am. But if you have good photos and it's in the right type of habitat for the species, they'll verify your reports. So you can go ahead and pop back and see what you're looking at live. So right now it's not available. So until this is actually updated, you won't be able to see it on the map. And last but not least, if this is a bit of a whirlwind of information to take in at once, there is a great tools and trainings section here. So over here on the right, all these training materials, really the basics of the walkthrough for how to use the app. I think I went over most of it, but there's more details in there as you might want to go through, especially for the pro and getting your counties up and everything like that. It's all stuff that you will you may want to look at if you want to get more serious about this with your backyard or whatever else it is. So quickly, I got a couple other things to show you here. And let's see, where's my presentation mode? There we go. So there is going to be another cool tool. You're saying, well, I don't know when to look at this stuff. There's an invasive species calendar that I have a link page here that's going to be also in the PDF. So this is great if you're not sure, you want to look for a certain species, but you don't know when it's flowering or when it's not. They have this life stages, and so by how full the various circle is will let you know if it's dormant and observable. If it's not at all observable right there, it's blank. You can't find that species right then anyways. So it can be a nice little tool to go alongside of EddMAPs, saying, well, I want to go look for tree of heaven, but it's not very easy to find in March. But if I look for it in September when it's fully flowering and it's mature fruits and seeds, then it's a lot easier to find. So just a nice little thing in case you get frustrated looking for a certain species, or you want more details about where things are in their life cycle. Nice tool to have. Again, a reminder to do all these things. I just get overly like gunned up about talking about this. It's super important stuff. And another plug, we're making this right-of-way trifold right here. So if you're more interested in some of these common species, you can get a hold of us. There'll be a digital copy of this available as well that we're working on to do just like getting to the rights-of-way crews so that they can do this kind of stuff and help you with your reporting and ID. I hope that you can get out there and share this with your colleagues and your crews, and use this as a way to talk to your neighbors, or maybe talk to your city about the infestations that you have that we want to control. Here's some resources for looking stuff up, and again, this will be laid out. The invasive species calendar is that bottom one. There's other great resources from the WIFTN, the First Detectors Network. You can also look at live stuff at the an AIS mapping tool, which is another great monitoring thing. It's not quite as comprehensive as EddMAPs, but it can be a good thing for other planning moments. And then there's your eddmaps.org page. So with that, I'd like to thank you for a whole 50 minutes of me talking and listening. So for your attention, I do have a few minutes left to take some questions. I see a couple in the chat. And don't be shy, drop me an email with questions about this, about using the program and other invasive species related issues. So thanks again, and thanks to Skip for hosting this and organizing all this. We had a great turnout, and I will hopefully see you soon on the water.